I want to talk about a riddle. The riddle could be called the riddle of the reptilian brain. It could be called the riddle of the trap in domination, the riddle of moving from victimhood to authority. But it is a riddle. And the largest expression of that riddle in my adult life, or at least the area that I've examined the most, came as I was examining the possibility of suicide in my mid to late 30s. And so why does suicide present? There were a couple of threads, and I'll show some of the spirals that led into suicide. So one of the spirals was a path of diminishing returns in growth, right? So the first wave of suicide came in my teens, and at that point, I had a lot to look forward to. There was leaving the house to look forward to. There was starting a business. There was making money. There was learning skills. There was the Lazaris narrative of the New Age and all the wonderful things that were going to come in the next few decades. So there were so many things that could get better. And so the hypothesis was that I would not want or need to commit suicide because the pain would be reduced by all of those things. So that spiral, though, right, slowly moves back to suicide as the Lazaris techniques do not work adequately, right, to make reality more pleasurable than painful. They did work adequately to improve my life 30% working with the inner child and the inner adolescent. But that didn't change the ratio of pain to well-being, which throughout my life has stayed negative. Then there was leaving home, right? But leaving home did not lead to the end of cultural trauma and disappointments and loneliness and all of that, right? It just transferred those to other places. Like I left home and started staying with a friend until the friend's father kicked me out. And I started my, business. My parents had got me a student visa in Canada as an American, but then they hadn't bothered to renew it. So when I went on a trip and came back, they said, where are you living? I said, here. And, so Canada then kicked me out because, I was living illegally as a 18-year-old in Canada. And, my parents had not bothered to update the visa or anything. So, then Canada kicked me out. Then I started making more money, doing various things along those lines, but it didn't lead to well-being. And as I grew my business, it became more difficult to stay connected with myself, right? So I quote, succeeded while feeling worse. And that remained kind of a frustrating dynamic. Then, I had a vision about, giving my work away as a gift. I thought, well, let's give that a try. And immediately people not only lost respect for me, but they took advantage and paid me half as much money. And I started living out of my car. So, okay, that vision really isn't leading anywhere, right? So visions become dangerous rather than helpful. And then, I grew my business some more, and, started traveling out of the U.S., but then I hated to come back to the U.S., and I couldn't quite get around that nub, right? I really didn't like spending time in the U.S. But the U.S. is a very efficient place to make money. I, started eating delicious food, the best in the world, but my body gets used to it almost immediately. And so pretty soon I'm enjoying the best food in the world less than I was enjoying an apple when I was really present in my body, right? And so I realized there's nowhere else to go. I've got 50 varieties of the best organic teas. I've got the best food eating out and in. I'm a good cook. It just isn't doing it. And by this time, right, my relationship with several Lazaris friends, socially and romantically, all had a sour taste. I had a men's group with 2 Lazaris friends, 2 other men, and one of them violated a business contract and then blamed me for it. That was an energy healer. The other one was going down into deeper and deeper, paranoia about all kinds of things. And I would listen to his paranoias of various things, and it's just like, what are you talking about? I mean, your, quote, metaphysics are worse than nothing the way that you're doing that, right? And I had a male friend that was a Lazaris friend who was, and what, they all hated, they were all furious. All of them were furious about the women, Lazaris friends or otherwise, right? Seething, my friend, was always like, oh, she's trying to doing this and it's unfair and this. And I thought, this is such a joke, that this is the new age, right? Lazaris friends bitching about their wives. Anyone can do that, So, that's there's no reasonable hope that spending time with the Lazaris friends is somehow the answer. This is absurd, right? One can't do business as cleanly as an average person, right? And then you have to go down the deep end of these conspiracy theories and all that. And it's not that whether they're true or not. It's like, but my dad, who was also a Lazaris friend in his spare time, my dad had gone down endless conspiracy theories, all generally amounting to why he shouldn't do anything of his responsibilities because, with the Mayan calendar coming to an end, you're like, why bother paying off debt or picking your kids up from school? I mean, the Mayan calendar is coming to an end. Or Edgar Cayce says this. Lazaris says this, So, and then, so basically feeling like I'm surrounded by flaky idiots that, seem to be using the Lazaris material to be even more flaky and idiotic than average. And so after my romantic relationship ended due to traumatic rages, like I was traumatized and raged at and there was an abusive bullying dynamic there. It's so where's all this going, right? So there's this. It's all fucked up, right? Well, after that repeats itself enough, the joy and innocence and sense of like, well, let's try something new, and what about this, slowly deteriorates, and the growth is less. The effort feels more. I'm tired. I'm irritable, right? So, and then I'd achieved thousands of goals by this point, right? And that was fun initially, but the goals that are easy to achieve in a materialistic culture are goals around money or doing projects, making things happen. They're not goals around states of being or relationships. I could not get someone to practice eye gazing with me. Seems easy enough, right? Just enjoy the beauty of eye gazing? No. How about high-value invitations? Make them, receive them, create peak experiences? No. I wrote to like 300 women as an experiment one time, and I said, who wants to have a peak experience? It's not hard. You just brainstorm. I worked out the protocol. It's so easy. And 2 women wanted to have a peak experience out of 300. And they did, right? There was a peak experience for both of them. But for me, no one has ever invited a peak experience, one. And it became part of a pattern of I initiate 99% of the intelligent good things I want in my life. I'm resisted by a majority in various forms. A minority comes tentatively along. I put on all the work to do the initiation, all the work to do the design, all the work to teach them how to do it. Then we do it. And they're like, wow, this is this amazing thing. And then they don't then say, well, let's do that again, or it just fizzles out. In other words, I kept noticing that anything really great required me doing about 95% of the work. And then it just went flat, like connecting dead batteries. But I also noticed that I couldn't do these things alone, right? It's so easy to do them with someone else, but I couldn't create peak experiences alone. And so that leads me to try and create them with someone else. But that leads into this protocol where I do 95% of the work. And they say it's absolutely amazing, but not amazing enough, apparently, to learn how to do it, to invite me to do stuff back to where it could become sustainable. So even though those good events, and there were numerous of them, I hosted groups at my house where there were 12 people, and we all created a peak experience using our own recipes and using a technology I developed. So every single person left with a plan to have a peak experience with another member of the group, which is an unheard of statistic. I've never been to a group like that. And it's fabulous, right? But the amount of energy it takes to organize a group and get people to show up and teach them the technique, right? And they want to pay like $20 or $30 or something like that. And then they don't all show up and all that. So there's an atrophying nature, and it doesn't seem to be particularly personal. I've talked with event organizers in the Bay Area, and they all basically say the same. It's really tough to get people to show up. And I don't want to spend my time getting people to show up, right? But if I don't spend my time doing that, nothing really great happens. Right? So there's this catch-22 again, where I feel tired and irritable as I have diminishing returns, meaning the first time I held an event to teach people peak experiences, it was fabulous. I'm learning, I'm growing. But the third time, they're learning and growing, and I'm putting in 95% of the work. And there just doesn't seem to be the cultural intelligence to really appreciate and feed that back. Now, I know that, so when I attend workshops where great work is going, I tip, I give double the price or whatever. I make sure when in donation situations to give a lot so that other organizers that I want to keep going will keep doing that. But it is a minority mindset. And so a lot of those really good people that put in a lot of the work go dormant, right? Because they get worn out. And the things have been going downhill culturally, things have also been going downhill. You know, there are fewer things that cost more money that are less good in the Bay Area that I'm aware of. I did travel, right? And, found that like in Thailand, I was 3 times happier. But I couldn't break through into the kind of relationship that I wanted. And it became, again, a diminishing return, right? So after like 10, 20 trips to Thailand, it's not doing what it first did. I want it to be something, I want it to keep growing. And I can't tell you how irritating and just mind-boggling it is to have woman after woman after woman experience a rapid increase in well-being and, due to a conscious microculture that I design, and then taper off above average as if that's it, right? This is good enough for me. But we're just getting started. No, it's good enough for me. That's fine, let's just relax and do this. I can't tell you how disgusting, maddening, crazy-making it is to find all these women that supposedly want all this growth just tapering off after a bit above average and not putting in the work to make it great, right? Now, that's maddening. But the other maddening thing was the therapeutic diminishing returns, right? Go to this therapist, this therapist, this therapist, this therapist, this energy worker, that energy worker, right? At one point, I think I maxed out at 6 hours a week, triaging the 3 best energy worker therapist people and feeling like I was basically flatlining. Sometimes I go in and it's worse than when I went in. Sometimes I go in and it's about the same. I really don't see what happened. And other times it's better. But it's always expensive, and it always takes a certain amount of stress to be there on time and drive there and park there and manage the traffic because I don't like being late. So there's always a cost, and a third of the time there's a good benefit, and it's just not going anywhere. Now, it turned out later that it had tapered off because I had complex PTSD, and not any of the people I had the misfortune to do work with were competent to evaluate what I was actually there for, which I didn't know, and they didn't know, and they didn't make it their business to find out. So I'm spinning in circles because what I needed help with was complex PTSD, and that's not what they're trying to help with. I had dirty windows, and they keep cleaning the gutters. And I keep pointing at the windows, and they keep cleaning the gutters, right? So, anyway, that's so diminishing returns at, around the $100,000 mark in therapy, very clear that wasn't going. And of course, there's the Lazaris promise about crystals amplified, 1,000-fold by the back table staff at Concept Synergy, promising all kinds of wonderful things if you just bought this crystal or that. But after 2 tons of crystals, 70,000 purchased at Concept Synergy, and then learning that they charge 10 times more than everyone else, then, another, 30,000 elsewhere, but 2 tons of crystal, and no, it's not changing anything. What, a third ton? It needs another 2,000 pounds worth of crystals to, some of it just becomes nonsensical, right? Go to see a therapist, but 6 hours a week, 3 therapists, not enough, right? At what point does it become just absurd, right? And I already had all the things I wanted, right? I didn't need a nicer house. I didn't need a nicer car. I didn't need nicer clothes. Right? Everything I wanted was not available, right? The kind of quality of interaction, the kind of responsibility, the this, that, wasn't available in or out of Lazaris. and everything I really didn't care about, it's, just keep making more money. I don't want to deal with that, right? Right. Then there's also the trajectory with my company, right? You're supposed to keep getting bigger and all that, but I don't enjoy managing idiots. And I, for whatever reason, have been unsuccessful in the 300 employees that I've hired in finding more than hard-working Latinos mostly, and they're lovely people. They don't want to think, and they don't want to grow into a business owning situation. It's, they come up, they do what they're told. They're very hardworking, but they don't want to learn, they don't want to think, right? So disappointing. I love learning, I love thinking, and I hired lots of great mentors, and I learned from them all the time. And, it's just, and again, clients just want to be a little nicer than the neighbors, nothing extravagant 90% of the time. I'm just living my life, right? They're all excited, but it's nothing special, right? So again, what to live for? I'm in more pain than well-being. Chronically, consistently, despite all this, right? So if I feel worse after making the first $100,000, another 100,000, that's going to do it? Right. If I feel worse after $150,000 in therapy, another 100,000 is going to do it. If I feel worse after 2 tons of crystals, buy a 3rd ton of crystals and wait, and then magic is going to happen. Right. If listening to all the Lazaris tapes in my teenagers did not either change the country much or do this or that, going to another workshop, that's going to do it, right? So, right, and so hedonic adaptation means that there's less vitality and enjoyment with doing the same old stuff. And after doing all this, trying different diets, doing this, reading hundreds of books, achieving thousands of goals, that's I'm still in more pain, but I have less hope, right? Right? Because they're still saying it at the back table, oh, if you buy this, it'll change your whole neighborhood. I just don't believe them, right? And Lazaris is still spouting out about the New Age and I just, look, Lazaris, you're not paying attention to your crowd here, right? They're still going on about this and that and You're not teaching them shit, Lazaris. Right? Why don't you teach, basic business contract law or something that would be useful to these people? Right? It's not working, and that's painful. Right? Because, anyone that's worked with Lazaris for a while, there's something there. You feel something at times, right? But this is what it results to. Guys getting together to bicker about their wives and how they're undermining a negative ego and this and that. I mean, that's like, you don't need Lazaris for that, right? You can go to any bar. What's new about this? New Age. This is bullshit. So, right, so this, lot of disappointment, a lot of pain, a lot of craziness, and less hope, right? So that's, one of the spiral, in towards suicide. But then, there's also more trauma happening along the way in romantic relationships. This is going, that's, so, I have to put up more and more defenses, all right? So, it starts out here, the innocence of new relationship, and then, then a woman says, well, you never told me the thing that you never asked about. And so it's like, okay, I guess it's my job to proactively tell people all the things they don't ask about. Okay, but now they don't want to listen. wait a minute, so you're going to blame me if I didn't tell you, you're not going to ask me, and then you're going to complain if I tell you. That seems to be the size of it, right? So that's the kind of, well, how do you work through that, right? Right, then there's the dissociative trauma, right? There's the women that sleep with you and then in the middle of something, they just get up and leave and there's no container, there's no framework, and there's seemingly no sense of any honor of, we agreed to go into this together and now you're just off. And whether it's a Lazaris friend or someone else, just off they go. Sometimes breaking agreements. Well, that triggers earlyhood, childhood attachment trauma. And, no awareness of that, no interest in that, no empathy around the impact, just, I've used you enough, off I go. And then, gee, you don't want to have me back in your life again when I feel like showing up randomly because I've tried my other alternatives or this or that? Oh my goodness, right? Well, so then you have to kind of negotiate a container. Like, are you interested in actually having a container, learning about partnering? Well, what's that? Of course I'm a partner, but I'm a free person. I get to do what I want, right? Not in a partnership. You do what you agree works for both of you. You discuss that, right? Well, nobody's going to tell me what to do in a partnership. I don't think you know what a partner is, right? So there's this all of that, right? Well, nobody's going to tell me what to do. Well, it just gets tiring, right? After a while. Right? Then there's the sloppy endings, right? How could you end the relationship like this? Well, how would you like me to end the relationship? Well, I haven't thought about it, but not like this. Well, maybe you ought to think about it. Oh, my goodness, right? Well, okay, it seems like what we ought to do is have an ending agreement at the beginning, right? Because you don't have an ending agreement at the end, how do you know it's an agreement? Maybe you don't agree how to end. So the time to have an ending agreement is at the beginning. So you're obviously interested in having sex with me. Do you want to have an ending agreement about what it looks like when one of us decides to end? After all, 95% of all relationships end before death, meaning you or me is going to decide to end this statistically 95% of the time. So how about we have an ending agreement? Do you want to end with me? No. But I am aware of the statistics. So how about an ending agreement? So that you can feel loved with how I end with you, or that I can feel loved with how you end with me. I don't want to think about that. Oh gosh, my goodness, right? Well, how many of your endings have been good? You said the last guy was a jerk, this guy was a jerk. But did you tell them how you wanted them to end the relationship? No? Well, here's your chance. Or do you want to make me a jerk in a few months? Right. Off they go again, right? So it reaches this point of diminishing return after 100 lovers in different cultures and different countries and all kinds of amazing experience, right? Half the people right off the bat are worse than no relationship at all. That's not a good odds, right? And the other half that are better than no relationship at all require constant assistance and training to set up a framework that has reasonable odds of beginning well, going well, and ending well. Understanding that 95% of all relationships end for reasons other than death, whether they're Lazaris relationships or otherwise. But there's and the more I learned about the science of what makes a good statistical relationship, the more I realized that the women I encounter do not want to do it. It's very easy. I can tell you in a moment, right? You say, I'm attracted to you. I'd like to explore a good, healthy relationship. Great. All right. Let's spend 10 hours discussing an hour of this, an hour of that, an hour of that, an hour of that, back and forth. At the end of that, we'll have a map that includes the way we both want to end and where we can fit on that, the way we'd like to be friends, the stuff that's easily triggered, the interests we overlap, peak experiences we'd like to have together, sexual boundaries and commitments and understanding. It's so easy. 10 fucking hours is nothing. People spend that in TV in a week. But if you do that 10 hours, it's all it takes, 10 hours. It doesn't matter who you're doing it with. It's a good exercise, right? You could sit down with Adolf Hitler, and in 10 hours, if you're both honest, you could probably come up with some neat win-win things to do together, right? It's easy, but no one wants to do it. It's remarkable, stunning. Get into another tangled mess for 6 months? Oh, I'll do that all day long. Jump into bed with someone I don't know? Oh, you have no idea. Love to do it. I have women get up naked on the floor when I say, let's slow this down. Could we actually talk about this? No. I'm out of here, right? I don't want to see you. I don't want to be seen. I want to fuck. And then I want to blame you for the incompatibility. It is so fucking monotonous. It's disgusting. It's boring. And it's chronic. And it's wow, nobody's ever done that before. Nobody's ever said this to. It's it is so fucking miserable. Right? So here's the way. 85% of the time it can work beautifully. You just have to do it the way that it will work beautifully. If you plant a seed, get this amount of cover, germinate it, add this amount of water, the plant grows 99% of the time. You put it out in the sunlight, you don't water it for 3 days, the thing dies 100% of the time. So what do you want to do? Oh, well, I want better results, but I want to do it the way that everyone's doing to get bad results, statistically speaking. Well, fucking miserable. Put into the place of hurting people, right? Being hurt, being rejected constantly for trying to do the thing that makes sense, right? Oh, you're so analytical. Oh, of course, let's just fly this plane without looking at the manual. So much more spontaneous and interesting, isn't it? Well, look at your fucking track record. Right, you stupid person. You've just told me you failed with this person, you failed with that person, and you failed with that person. Well, if you're at all interested, I just had a great ending with this person, right? A great ending with that person, a good beginning, a good mapping with this person. We had a peak experience here. We could do this. Oh, I don't want to do that. So, right? Never once in my entire fucking life have I had decent invitations to do things really intelligent, right? Who wants to drag idiots kicking and screaming into a good relationship? Nobody. But that's basically it. Have no one, or drag people who don't know and in many cases don't want to know into doing something new that works. And then they're delighted when it's a little better than average. Oh, this is so wonderful. No, it isn't. We're just beginning. This is not wonderful. This is okay. This is okay. It's much better than horror, but it's okay. Right? So plateau after plateau after plateau. So then I have to negotiate, will you agree to go to joint therapy proactively? Right? For all the things you don't want to know that you don't want to know. No, I don't want to do that. I might learn something. Right? So basically, it's reached the point where I learn relatively little, right, and do 80, 90% of the work and can get a good result, or I just am lonely because I don't want to bother doing all that. The growth has tapered off doing this much of the time. So it's just painful, incredibly painful. And all the scars from all the times I've touched on people's fear of the unknown and they've lashed out, and they're all there in my body. And I don't have a very good way of digesting them. And I'd love to learn that way, but our culture is not very good at teaching ways of digesting traumatic triggers, right? And Lazaris's give them to us and do that also does not work very well. I'd say I get 5 to 10% relief from, those interactions with Lazaris for a few hours, or maybe 30% for an hour, right? But it doesn't move the needle in a big way, right? And as I understand the landmines that the culture has set up in so many different ways, and start seeing things statistically, like if I do this, there's a 50% chance that that'll happen. If I do this, there's a 90% chance that that'll happen. If I do this, there's a 10% chance it'll happen, or this. These are not good things to happen, right? If I'm with a client and I pay attention to their sensitive child and advocate for the child with the parent who's not sensitive, I get punished, the kid gets punished, and nobody learns from the most intelligent person in the family, which is the sensitive child. It's not that wonderful things open up. So I have to play along with the cult and ignore the sensitive child that knows how to do things, right? And get paid lots of money to be stupid, right? Which is better, right? To be punished for honoring the sensitive kid, or paid lots of money to be stupid. Neither of them are good. They're pathetic, right? And this is just what our cult has to offer, right? So there are too many statistics, and I'm tired of jumping over the fucking hoops. Do this, and there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and it's just so fucking boring, right? So it's painful. But where's the hope? Where's the fucking hope, right? Well, then come psychedelics, right? Well, the first sitter nearly killed me by giving me an overdose of MDMA that blacked out, and I nearly died as I fell on a glass thing in the house. And then it's all my responsibility, right? It's all my fault, right? So fine, I'm dealing with a moron sitter, right? I thought I knew what I was doing, but it's hard to know what you're doing in a cult that censors the legal information about best practices and makes the whole thing fucking illegal, right? So anyway, I try another one, right? He sexually molests me under the influence of a high dose of MDMA and psilocybin, right? And then begins a long reenactment of my childhood abuse, blaming and shaming and da-da-da. And because he's a leader in my community at the Human Awareness Institute, cuts me off of the group emails and various things. And all my therapists get together because I've got the whole thing recorded so that I could learn from it. And they're all worried about the demise of their organization. They're not worried about their patient. I mean, who cares about the patient, right? So it's just a fucking farce. It's a joke as they do one stupid thing after another, right? Mirroring my parents to protect their organization, right? Suing their client but they never actually do the right thing, which is inform the public, their clients, about what's going on or provide help, right? It's just so sickening, right? And then I start seeing the pattern. Right? All the stupid things that are going on at so many levels. And then I have to assume, as part of that pattern, I have to assume that I'm just as stupid, right? That I'm doing stupid things for stupid reasons, copying the idiots around me to make things worse, right? You look at the United States war on terror, right? You spend $8 trillion of debt to terrorize large segments of the world to reduce terror, providing massive ammunition to fuel people joining terrorist organizations who are trying to fight back from drones dropping bombs on their weddings. Of course they're fighting back, you fucking idiots, right? So my government's a fucking moron and sociopath. My therapists are fucking morons and sociopaths. My parents are fucking morons and sociopaths, right? Any better at the Lazaris community? You know, it's sickening. It's enraging. It's painful. Fucking painful. But where do you turn? Right? Well, Lazaris has got his new quote of the week, right? Magic and this, and the great human being and this. But is that helping any of the other Lazaris friends? Like, why are they behaving this way then, right? Is that helping my therapy, you know? Is it helping me? Right? And I'm still in more pain and more terror than well-being the whole time. So I'm back to suicide, right? Back to suicide, which takes me into the psychedelic, you know, territory. It's like, this is really the only thing that I haven't explored. Maybe, you know, maybe it'll kill me, but, you know, maybe there's some benefit here, right? But it's not looking good. And the saddest thing, you know, about this whole dynamic, right? I have lovers, I have clients, I am a client, right? I have therapists, I have employees, right? And with clients, I learned very quickly that if I didn't have a written agreement that covered all the clauses, they became insane, right? The first client I had in design, I charged her $7 an hour to do a design, including a drawing, for $49. She did 80%, she took the drawing, she did 80% of the design and didn't want to install all of the design. So she said, I'm not paying you for the design because I didn't install all of it. I mean, do you realize how, and this was a, you know, this person would have fit into Lazaris community like anything, right? Now, no one's been quite that stupid before because I've had a because I had a contract, but the idea that you had to cover these types of points to get treated fairly is so sickening. It's mind-boggling. So that's clients, right? You have to write out every fucking thing. Oh, you didn't tell us you don't want us to hire your staff on the side, right? Here, I'll give you more money if you finish the job you know, on the weekend, and we'll get rid of the contractor, right? Oh, you didn't tell us that wasn't okay. Oh my goodness, really, the things we have to spell out in contracts, right? So it's fucking disappointing, right? Right, and lovers, like, oh, you didn't say that was the nice way to end, or you didn't do this, you didn't tell me that was important to you, you didn't do. Okay, let's have a contract. Well, oh, I have to, so unromantic to have a contract. Oh my goodness, right? Well, right, given that you're committed to being stupid and unfair without one, let's have a contract. I'll keep my end. You don't have to worry about that. I do more than agreed. Right? That's generally my policy. So I do it with clients. I do it with lovers. Right? Oh, they forgot this. They didn't do that right. Even with a fucking contract, right? And some don't want to, get involved unless there isn't a contract, because it's not as easy to exploit the situation. Disappointing, right? Right. And then there's the therapists. I started turning bitter, hostile, terrified, and 5 times more PTSD when the response to asking for help at the Human Awareness Institute, where Peter Sandhill sexually molested me under the influence of psychedelics, was, first of all, to ask that I don't tell anyone, not tell any of their clients, which is against their mission statement, right? So this is already feeling odd. Then they wanted me to pay them hourly to fix the mess because I'd hired their sexual predator. So I was supposed to pay them to advise me to keep it all secret, when that was actually the shame in the whole family system. When that was the problem of loneliness, I was invisible, kept beneath the secret of the family lies. So I was supposed to pay other therapists to advise me on how to keep being invisible and lonely, and to protect the abuser from the public. I mean, the public knowing this is the Human Awareness Institute, trying to get their sexually abused client to pay them to advise them on a protocol that would make sure that no one was aware of what was happening at the Human Awareness Institute. It became so insane. And I kept going along, trying to be, empathic, etc. And I got smaller and smaller and smaller, till I realized that my pain could be off the charts and that I could die as long as their secret was kept. That was the only thing that was really driving the show, which meant that their commitment to nobody knowing what was going on was their single biggest drive. Their fear of being seen was their biggest driver. It felt so lonely and so small being in that world, because on the one hand, I knew, once I discerned that this was the driving pattern, I knew that I could manipulate them easily with their fear of being seen. That was their biggest driver. But what a fucking joke to have to manipulate your therapist to do the right thing for the public, right? To try and create public safety by manipulating your therapist out of fear, their fear of being seen. It was a riddle I could not solve, right? It felt horrible and lonely to move into driving the right decisions out of fear. It just felt horrible, absolutely horrible, particularly after the transcendent psychedelic experiences, right? It felt so fucking miserable, right? You're not going to do anything right for the public unless you are poked with fear every fucking inch, right? Every fucking inch you're poked, right? So I became a poker, right? Do this, do that, or I'll tell this, or I'll tell that, right? Tell the public here, this, that. It's just so absolutely fucking miserable. And then to see the doors open up, they couldn't do this, they couldn't do that. Oh, but to hide their secrets, suddenly they could do all kinds of things, right? So basically I thought, they're no worse or better than average people, but they're 60 to 70% fear-driven. And they're only 30 to 40% love-driven. And they're terrified that this comes out and bad things happen to them. And so the only way they're going to do the good thing is out of fear. That's bigger than the fear of that, right? So you have to corner them between two fears. They're afraid if people see this, the bad things will happen. So they have to be more afraid if they don't do the right thing, bad things will happen. That's the only thing that does it. And I felt so absolutely devastated when I realized that my heroes, that my role models, that my teachers, that my therapists at the Human Awareness Institute, right, were cowards. We're ignorant, right? We're traumatized, we're stupid, right? And would kill someone rather than have their secret exposed, right? Because I was veering towards death in response to their defense protocols. And I realized I could die. And they were not worried about that. They were worried about the defense. They didn't become worried about me until I linked it with their reputation. Then they grudgingly took care of me, not for me, but for their reputation. Right? What a fucking group of cowards. And yet, better than average. Better than average. So what do you do when better than average is cowards? I don't know, right? It's fucking painful. It's fucking terrifying. Because it's not personal and it's not limited to the Human Awareness Institute, right? You can look at politics, you can look at legal systems, you can look at the homeless. It's the exact same thing, over and over and over again. And it's so lonely to have to be the poker, right? It's fucking miserable. I don't want to live for that. Right? It's no great accomplishment that a fear-based coward doing the wrong thing out of fear switches to doing the right thing out of fear. It's no fucking accomplishment. You're still dealing with a snake. You're still dealing with an animal. Right? You've just given them a different incentive. And it is fucking miserable. Right? So this is the kind of the crux of the matter, right? It's broken my heart in many ways, right? To go into this steering mode, right? Because, if it's just me, well, I could say, well, why can't I just grow out of it or move on? But an institution that's touching tens of thousands of people's lives, that's committed to cruelty, ignorance, stupidity, and abuse, and then committed to covering it up at the expense of the public's lives. It's not just me dealing with it, right? I've subsequently connected with other sexual abuse survivors who are having just as difficult a time dealing with this, and who are being lied to and told that this didn't happen, right? So then I create a bunch of websites to go over all this type of stuff. This was long before this, Lazaris website. And it helps people, right? People say, oh, thank you for, But what to do, right? What to do when the abusers are better than average, right? I'm convinced there's probably half of the world dealing with these types of topics that are worse than the Human Awareness Institute, right? How about the Catholic Church, 5% pedophiles? And all the cover-ups there, much worse. So what do you do? What do you do, right? And then there's some that are worse or the same, but have none of the benefits. The Human Awareness Institute has positive aspects. They've taught me a variety of things that are quite useful to this day, right? So, and there's other sexual abusers that don't teach you anything useful, right? So at least if you're going to be abused, you might as well learn something along the way. So I am not at all convinced that getting rid of the Human Awareness Institute will result in a more ethical group of people forming a new institute that would do better. I think statistically that's unlikely. Obviously, fools willing to molest a client under the influence of psychedelics and spend more energy covering it up than helping the client are so dumb, right? They're not going to get the help that they need, right? If they were, so they're too dumb to get help, right? So they'll do a little bit out of fear, but like, I don't know, it's fucking miserable. It's every time, I try and push them in this and that, it just feels sickening, right? It's also, right, getting people, Lazaris talks, manipulating people out of fear, the domination, the horrible thing. So what's Lazaris's answer to the pedophiles in the Catholic Church? Loving them, giving them money, rotating things around didn't seem to do too much good. Number one, Lazaris did not do a goddamn thing about it, right? Where was Lazaris helping those kids So what's the solution, right? If people have a motivational drive that's fear and, let's say, positive vision and stuff, and there's always something to be frightened of, particularly in a shame-based cult. People don't want anything bad about them being known. Well, you try and help them, and the stuff has to be known. But they don't want to be helped because that would involve things being known. And they're more frightened than they are worried about anyone being hurt by their ignorance, by their cruelty. Now, this is no difference in doctors. It's no different in surgeons. I've been listening to near-death experiences of late. And this woman talks about seeing all the incompetence in the surgical room that led to her death. And she comes back and she knew all the things that were going because she had a near-death experience. And the head surgeon just shouted at her and, you loony, I'm not listening to this and this and that. So here's a person who's been killed by her fucking doctors, being shouted at and humiliated for asking them to actually validate her near-death experience, which included seeing their shitty behavior. She wasn't trying to sue them. She was trying to validate her experience, right? Fucking morons. It's just sick, right? So what's Lazaris's answer to this kind of bullshit, right? It's great for Lazaris to say, well, you created all this, but Lazaris always says you did it, right? Which is exactly what every Lazaris friend does. You created that. Why did you do that? Not one Lazaris friend and not one Lazaris ever says, why did I create you having all that? Right? Why did Lazaris create me talking about this? Right? He never owns any responsibility, as if he can't respond in any way or whatever. That he's never apologized for anything. So it's always you. It's always you. And so people copy that, and it's always you. But that's not very useful, right? It's not very useful, right? So, now I know how not to create quite as sick a therapist, but a good therapist is hard to find, right? Because even a good ethical one, it turns out, is very bad at dealing with trauma, using their normal tools of talk therapy, right? So it's a muddy, it's a muddy thing. So clients are now a little bit more in line because there's a contract, right? And therapists are a little bit more in line, or at least easier to flush out because there's transparency and websites and this and that, right? And lovers mostly avoid, engaging at all when they see that it's going to be in a framework of transparency and partnership and let's discuss best practices and actually be responsible. Oh, I don't want to do that. I just want to hook up, right? And so mostly they just disappear, and the few that remain are certainly more responsible than they would be without that kind of a framework. And then employees, right? Oh, they don't have time for this. They don't have time. Oh, they couldn't do this, right? And you fire them or give them a penalty, whatever. And then they rush to, not because they're interested in what's great for the customer or this, but they don't want to get fired, and right. So it's back to that thing, right? Every fucking thing, right? And so we have laws, and then we have police force, and we have military to enforce the laws. Right? Because people don't want to follow the laws without this, right? It's the same thing, right? Fear is the dominant driver, right? Had it with with my current relationship. It's like if you keep doing this, we're separating. Oh, I don't want to separate. Yeah, but we're going to. Because I don't want this. Oh, okay, I'll do what I said I would do. Oh, great. Because you don't want to separate. You didn't do what you said you would do when I said it hurt me. You didn't do what you said you would do when I said how it was costing me money or damaging my health. No, you're doing what you said you would do because you're scared of me leaving you. What a shitty reason to do it, right? So I would, for 2 years, I didn't do any penalty fear things with my employees. I wanted that. I explained again and again and again and again and again, right? For a year, I didn't do penalty things with my therapists, right? For years, I didn't do penalty things with my relationship, right? I just explained again, this is hurting me, this is not this is what you agreed, this is why we agreed it, and this is hurting me. Doesn't change, right? That'll cost you $1,000. Oh, let's do it immediately. Not because you care, not because you haven't, because you don't want to spend the $1,000. What a shitty driving system. So, right? So I'm motivated mostly by fear. Fear of being hurt, fear of this, fear of that, fear of the other. Other people are motivated mostly by fear. Right? There's a 70-30 split. Fear, vision, love, all of that stuff. It's painful, it's dehumanizing, that's a reptile, right? That's kind of the traumatized thing, and it's just miserable. And right, God is love, all this stuff. It's just like, what do you do with this, right? What do you do with it? Why does Concept Synergy hire a security guard to stop Lazaris friends who are unwanted entering the building? Right? Out of fear. Right? It's not out of vision, right? If you had a 33-second technique that would make all those Lazaris friends be happy again, why not do that? Obviously, it doesn't work. Well, what do you do, right? Fear. Now, this is absolutely miserable. I feel alone. I feel dehumanized. I feel sad. I feel enormous pain. I feel distrust. I feel grief, right? So nice to go to people and say, here, I found this way that works. Well, why aren't you interested? You said you wanted something that worked. This works. I've done the test. It works. No. Fear of the unknown. It's driving the show. I don't want to do it. It's new. Nobody's ever showed me that way. Fear of the unknown. 70% fear, 30% love. Right? So it sounds good, but I'm in 70% fear of the unknown, so I'm not going to do it. Why don't you tell me what's really going on here so that I can help you? Well, I'm afraid you'll humiliate me, so I'm not going to do it. 70% fear, 30% love, right? It's fucking maddening. So what to do with this is the whole thing bullshit, right? Just fuck it. Just get out of here. It's a good reason to die, right? Hopefully it's not like this in transcendent realms. So that's, it's no fun manipulating people. It's no fun. Most people don't want to talk about this dynamic. You ask someone, why aren't you doing this? They'll come up with some spiel. But you just tip the incentive to where now it's more scary to not do it, and suddenly they do it. But what about all those reasons you couldn't do it, right? Well, now they're doing it, right? Magically, and willingly, right? The whole capitalist ethos is based on a fear-greed dynamic, right? 70% fear and greed. The whole legal system, the whole government system. Why do you need a fucking government to do the right thing? Right? Why don't you, fear and greed, fear and greed, fear and greed, right? So it's a very big fractal pattern. And I see zero difference in the Lazaris community than anywhere else. There's more craziness in the Lazaris community, but I don't see much difference in the fear-greed ratio. And there are, of course, wonderful exceptions, in different areas. But, so I can't tell you how miserable this was to really grasp and realize that this is happening, has been happening, and it's going to continue happening, right? Fear and greed are in the majority. As a cult, as a species, fear and greed is in the majority. And so to pivot something, you need a vision and fear and greed. So that is epitomized by walk peacefully and carry a big stick. In other words, have an incentive to do the right thing and have a stick willing to beat someone if they don't. The combination of that is, of course, gets over the 50% threshold, where the 30% of you that wants to do good combines with the 70% that'll do whatever it takes to avoid the fear of the unknown, the fear of reenacting trauma, the fear of the dark law, the fear of the root emotion, the fear of shame, the fear of all these, fear of looking bad, right? So when you ally and you frighten yourself or another person combined with vision, it overcomes the 50% majority need so that people make incremental steps forward. And that is very important because those incremental steps forward create superabundance. And what superabundance does through things like capitalism, which works with reviews. If you do business with someone, I've tried doing online business with people outside of the review sites, they steal the money. You put them in the review site window, and they're afraid of their reputation, right? And so they're not doing the work because they value you as a customer. They're doing the work out of fear of losing their reputation and losing money. How shitty is that? Well, it's normal. In a sociopathic culture with highly traumatized sociopathic people, it is the norm for fear to be the driver, the largest motivator in the interaction. And it is fucking miserable, particularly when you understand that normalcy takes you off here to mediocrity and misery, and happiness takes you off here into the unknown. And people's fear of the unknown will lead to 90% of people, 90% of the time, choosing mediocrity, misery, and normalcy over anything new. It is fucking incredible to show even highly intelligent people, this is the statistics and this is the way to do things. And they don't want to do it, right? Go figure. And so what to do with this, right? So one thing is die, right? This is a miserable, lonely environment to live in with miserable, fear-based, lonely people. Let's leave, right? And what's going on? This is bad. This is domination. This is negative ego. All this stuff. However, if we look at the spiral of evolution from dust, into slime, into crawling out of the water, into standing erect, to becoming somewhat human, and where we're at in that unfolding. The reptilian brain has transitioned most of its authority to the rational brain. So we started off with nothing, right? Then we got the reptilian brain. Now we've got the rational brain, and the emphasis has been moving slowly from the reptilian brain to the rational brain, and even more slowly from the rational brain to the human brain, and even slower than that to the transcendent brain. So we're now about 30% reptile, fight, flight, freeze, instinctual driven, which calms down when we're not in immediate crisis. And then we're about 50% rational. Right, so we got 80% between the rational and the rational reptile basically is 80% of what's driving human behavior on Earth. But there's 20% of human behavior, meaning 20% of the time the human empathic brain is dominant as the prevailing decider of what happens. Now, why is that happening? Well, the reptilian brain bred for survival of the fittest and created incredibly competent sociopaths, including the human animal, right? And having bred incredibly competent sociopaths that could produce, that could create, we created enough abundance to begin to develop the rational brain on top of the reptilian brain. There was time to reflect. We became competent enough. Reptilian activity breeds for competence. Competence creates enough abundance for reflection and the rational brain, as in the rational reptile, the rational sociopath, with enlightened self-interest. I do the right thing for me, because then you will do the right thing for me, right? I do the right thing for you because you'll do the right thing for me. It's the right thing for me to treat you well because you'll leave me a good review. The enlightened self-interest of the rational reptile is where the species resides. But as we can see with capitalism and rational reptilian behavior, it has generated superabundance. Superabundance, which in turn is giving more space for more people to value and miss love and belonging, which is the third in our needs, but it's also the third brain. Love and belonging, the empathic brain. We cannot be empathic when we are fighting for our lives. When we are so incompetent that we're in a battle to survive, we cannot be empathic as a dominant operating system. We have to be secure in our survival. Only when we're secure in our survival does our attention shift from security to the next in our hierarchy of needs, love and belonging. So as we are creating more superabundance and thus security than we've ever had before, certainly with challenges to that in a variety of areas, but as we've done that, our need for love and belonging and our desire to be human, to fulfill our need for love and belonging, which can only be done through empathy, is getting more attention, but it's still in the minority. But that is a slow process. So the supermajority of the rational brain and the rational reptile is breeding through AI, through robots, through any number of things. It is creating superabundance, more abundance than has ever existed per capita. Right? But like me, like anyone who's got it all, doesn't care about it. You want to heal your trauma, right? Which none of my therapists were up to the task, but neither was Lazaris. Neither was I, right? Trauma captures you in the reptilian brain with the rational reptile in fear, right? Fear is the driver of the reptilian operating system. Rationality, right, is the driver of but it's fueled by fear. Rationality fueled by fear is most human behavior. But as we fulfill our need for security of survival and develop better trust frameworks through rational reptilian behavior, right, we will move through the need to have security as we meet that need for more of the population, and it does need to be met for all, into empathy, into love and belonging, and into the empathic brain, which is the opposite of the reptilian brain, right? And so all of this sickening, evil, reptilian, rational, cowardly behavior is all part of rational reptilian stage development, right? Which on the other side of that, right, as we get better apps for measuring trust and you can see, who has what skills and who doesn't, right? And particularly as the AI, engages and does more objective assessments, which of course then there'll be efforts to try and form other AIs that like us better than we like ourselves, or than the last AI liked us, to try and game the system, right? But eventually those systems can't be gamed, right? People that show up an hour late for meetings 80% of the time, it will be statistically clear that they can be trusted to show up an hour late most of the time, right? And people that show up early can be trusted to show up early, and people that cheat your money can be trusted to cheat your money, and people that pay back early with interest can be trusted to do that, right? Transparency will emerge as a data set as it becomes harder and harder to lie. And that fear of being seen will motivate the fear-based into better and better behavior, which will create more and more superabundance, because good behavior, it's not like, when my crew refused to learn anything, and I push them out of fear to learn more. It's not like I want to be able to give them a raise, right? So when it becomes clear who's studying what, and you can give a $100 bonus to the person who's studied the most that week, and a this and a that. Well, then when those nuances get tracked and developed, then better behavior and the competition, fear and greed kick in to create better and better behavior. And with better and better behavior comes more and more abundance, more and more competence that creates more and more abundance. And with more and more stuff, you can only have so many fucking houses, so many cars, before it's meaningless without love and belonging, right? And then what moves into the prominent position? Sometime over the next 1,000 to 10,000 years, I expect the species to move from 60% rational, 20, 30% reptile, into 60% human, 60% empathic, on the foundation of luxury bred out of fear, as long as people are fear motivated. And so science and kind of constructive models of incentives and stuff are a part of evolution in this brain development movement. And then because, of course, as soon as you become human beings who are empathic, you create the kind of superabundance, the kind of warmth, the kind of trustworthiness. We're becoming aware of our transcendence as spiritual beings becomes a joy rather than a horror. Right now, to discover that you are one with the lizard who's trying to sleep with your wife and lie about it is crazy making. We're all one. Yes, yes, and it's fucking painful to see how little you know it. And yet, that's coming out of rational reptile greed and fear. As soon as you move into the transcendent or the empathic brain as a human being and focus more on trustworthiness and empathy. Empathy breeds trustworthiness. Trustworthiness breeds love. Now opening up to the unity of all things is a delight. It's not a mind-numbing headache of horror. Like, how could I be one with the person who's trying to destroy me? Oh. It's horrible. It's horrifying, right? It's mind-numbing. It came very close to breaking me as an identity. To touch that through psychedelic experiences, transcendent love of my therapists, right? While they're busily trying to destroy and bury me out of fear. It's horrifying, and it's absolutely horrifying. But, to wake up to being one with people who actually know how to be kind. They love enough to care. They care enough to take time. They take enough time to see. They see enough to understand. They understand enough to empathize. They empathize enough to attune. And they attune enough to facilitate the successful realization of our need to survive, be secure in that survival, experience deep love and belonging, high levels of self-esteem, discover and develop our unique gifts, bring those gifts abundantly into the world, and become part of something bigger than ourselves, serve something more than ourselves, right? That's a world worth living in. That's a world worth loving in, right? But the rational reptilian state is part of that journey, right? Setting up the incentives, the stick and the carrot, so that people take the steps towards doing the right thing. And the right thing is what leads to the superabundance that leads to the pivot away from survival and security needs to thriving, healing, and loving needs, which is our next step as a species.